do you feel a shiver up your spine from fear? Yes, it's another story from the Nightshade Diary. You know what that means. Check under the bed and make sure no one or nothing is there. Is the closet door securely shut? Then leave your disbelief behind. Amp up your imagination and hang on tight for another ride into terror and mystery. And like all good horror stories, just imagine it's a dark and stormy night. And remember, screaming like a little girl is permitted. Blind Date by J. Lane Linklater. Madge walked towards the bar past the piano player. She didn't look at him, and he didn't look at her. It was against the rules for any of the girls to talk to the piano player. The piano player, as a matter of fact, didn't look at anybody. He didn't look at anything at all. He didn't even look at sheet music as he played. He didn't have any sheet music. He just sat there, a quiet-looking man with an expressionless face, eyes front, and tapped a melody out on the piano keys. It was past 1 o'clock in the morning. Pete was alone behind the bar and Madge was the only girl left on duty. Madge sat down at the bar just as a man came in. A newcomer sat next to her, motioning to Pete to draw 2 beers and set them up. The man had been in each night for the last 3 nights. He was well dressed, sallow face, closely shaved, but his dark eyes were too bright and too fixed in their gaze. He turned on his stool so that his gaze seemed to take in every inch of Madge's face. "Well," he said eagerly, "how about it, kid?" "How about what?" The man said impatiently, "You know what." Madge sipped her beer slowly. "What makes you think I'd go with you, Moxie?" "You know you don't mean that. Anyhow, you ought to be getting some fun out of life, getting service instead of giving it. I got dough, kid. I always got dough. If you was with me, it'd be all fun and no work." Madge twirled her glass thoughtfully. "You got a good line," she said. "But how about my husband?" Moxie cheered. "Some husband." Madge looked at Moxie. "Ever see him?" "I don't need to. Anyhow, the way I get it, he went out to sea, didn't he?" "Sure," said Madge. "He was gone 6 months, merchant marine, but he's back now." Music was coming from the piano. "But he still lets you work." "Sure," said Madge. "I talked him into that. He gets taken care of. But he's got folks to look out for, and so have I." "I still think your old man's a punk," said Moxie. "Now, if you came with me—" "My husband," said Madge, "wouldn't like the way you got your arm." "What he don't know," said Moxie, "won't hurt." "Sure, he can't see me," said Madge. Her eyes were half closed. "But even when he can't see me and ain't talking to me, he's got a way of telling me things." Moxie stared at her. "You got too many beers in you," he said. Madge didn't say anything. The street door opened and 2 men came in. They mingled in the crowd at first. Both of them looked briefly at Moxie. Unnoticed, they drifted into the dark little room just beyond the piano. There was no one else in there. They sat down, out of sight. No one could see them from the bar room. They were close to the piano player, but he didn't look at them, just went on playing. Madge got off the stool. Moxie restrained her. "Have another," he said. Madge shrugged. Moxie was a customer. She'd have to humor him. Pete showed up and served 2 more. The small clock on the sideboard said 1:40. The place would close at 2. The crowd was thinning out. Moxie's eyes were suddenly alive. "You're coming with me, kid. You know you are." "What's a husband?" whispered Moxie. "Especially a punk that lets you work in a crummy dump like this." Madge slid off the stool. "Okay," she said. "But I got to go telephone." "Okay," Moxie said cheerfully. "But you don't need to tell him where you're going." Madge disappeared through a rear door. Moxie's gaze was directed into the murky little room beyond the piano player. Moxie drummed his fingertips on the bar nervously. He wished Madge would hurry, but she wasn't long, and without hesitation She sat on the stool next to Moxie. Pete'll close the place in a couple of minutes, she said to Moxie. Maybe you better go. I'll wait, said Moxie, for you. The last customer was leaving. Pete had the money in a cloth bag close to the cash register. Pretty soon, he'd put it in the safe. Moxie's voice was hoarse now. You know what, kid? If you hadn't agreed to come with me, I was going to force you. Madge was still smiling. Moxie put a hand on her arm. He seemed very intent. Pete had pulled the blind down over the glass of the street door, was going back behind the bar. Okay, said Moxie in a loud voice. The piano player was standing up. As he stood up, he lifted his hands in the air. The two men in the dusky room beyond the piano appeared, both holding guns. Moxie, too, had a gun. Pete's hands went up. One of the gunmen stood against the piano player. The other covered Pete. Moxie walked behind the bar and took the money back. Easy, huh? Said Moxie. The two gunmen backed toward the door. Okay, kid, Moxie said to Madge. Here's where you and me start out together. Madge was still sitting on the stool. She didn't move. Moxie was impatient. Come on! Madge shook her head slowly. Moxie's face took on a greenish hue. His eyes were a dull glitter. Turning me down after all, huh? Well, you'll come with me, or you'll never go anywhere. Then the street door opened. There were several men on top of the two gunmen. Moxie roared. His gaze switched rapidly to the doorway, back to Madge again. Doubled me, huh? Well, you can take this. One of the policemen fired. The shot took Moxie's gun out of his hand. For that matter, it seemed to take part of the hand away. The piano player was explaining to Pete. Had me covered from the moment they came in. I went out and phoned the cops as soon as I could, Madge said, after John put me wise. Swell work, said Pete. You two and your musical double talk. You need a couple of beers. Madge shook her head. She put her arm about the piano player's shoulders. Time to go home, John, honey. The piano player turned his head and looked straight at her. The eyes were sightless, but the smile on his face was happy. He dropped a hand toward the piano. With one finger he tapped out 3 notes very gently. Did you understand that? The weariness vanished from Madge's face. Could I miss it? It said, I love you. Brand of Cain by Dan Gordon. They burned the kid with blazing guns. He was in the way, so they burned him. They were moving so fast, I suppose they didn't know it was a kid. Maybe they didn't care. The liquor store clerk ran out waving his arms, and they took a shot at him as they left. I said, God, and raced the engine. They piled in fast, and the guy with a gun in my neck didn't move his hand. Roll it, he said. I rolled it. I took them away from there. There wasn't any trouble from the cars that pretended to follow. They hung far back, as if the guys at the wheels were afraid they might overtake us. I twisted the heap around a little, weaving through the narrow suburban streets, then jockeyed out on the boulevard and joined a stream of traffic. They began to talk then, and I knew we were clear. The boulevard led downtown. The gun was gone from the back of my neck, but the ape on the front seat with me still had his left arm resting high on the cushion. I said, Got a cigarette on you? He fished for one with his right hand, leaving his left arm on the seat. In the rearview mirror I could see Tampa sitting in back with one called Whitney. Tampa started fumbling too. Catching his eye in the mirror, I said, Not you, you dirty son. I left it there. I'd have to think of another name. You can't call your brother that. Kid, said Tampa, grinning. You push a mean jalopy. I let up on the gas, and the car in back almost piled me. The guy bore down on his horn. Lay off the big brother act, I told him. I don't go for that stuff anymore. You will, my brother told me. You'll pick it up again. Never mind. Just keep it rolling, the guy beside me said. I gave it a little more gas and moved along with the traffic. The driving was nice and easy. The early morning rat race was done, and the guys with the plushy jobs were beginning to ooze towards their desks. Tampa and Whitey were counting the money. The ape beside me twisted his head to watch them. How much did we get? He asked. 300, said Tampa. Big money, I said. It's okay, Tampa agreed. 150 apiece? What? I said, You get 150 clams, split 3 ways, for each of the 2 men you killed. Your mouth, my brother said, has growed since I've been away. Whitey said, I don't know, Tampa. Your brother's got something there. You're getting too sharp with that gun. Witnesses, said Tampa. He wasn't sore like I thought he might be. Most of the guys that fry get in that spot through not having the guts to do a clean job. Whitey didn't say any more. Afraid of Tampa, I guess. I could understand that. I was afraid of Tampa, too. Always had been. Even when we were kids. Tampa was 10 years older than me, and there wasn't an ounce of pity anywhere in him. Things that would make most kids scared or sick, they just made Tampa laugh. Not that he kicked me around much. I learned from watching him work on the other kids. Where he had them beat was he was just plain didn't care. It never worried him how bad he hurt the other guy. And a guy who don't give a damn has got an awful edge on the rest of the world. They had me pull over to the curb 3 blocks away from the house. I got out, and Whitey took the wheel. You coming home? I said to Tampa. Later, kid. This heap's hot. We'll have to ditch it soon. I hadn't known that they'd stolen the car. I thought of the way I'd driven it slow and easy right through all that traffic. Tampa saw what I was thinking and laughed. Turn off the holy Jolo, Tampa said. You've been driving a stolen car, and you held up a liquor store. You told me you just wanted to stop in and get a bottle. And got one, said Whitey, holding it up. I grabbed it on the way out. They all laughed then. I walked away with my hands in my pockets. Behind me I heard the motor, but the car didn't pass. I guess they made a U-turn. I walked on, thinking along the familiar neighborhood streets. The cop in the corner spoke to me, and I managed to answer him. It was the same cop who'd caught Tampa stealing. Nobody knew how many times. The cop liked my father and mother. Told them Tampa was only passing through a stage. Tampa had passed through that stage. He'd passed through a lot of stages. Each one was worse than the last. In jail and out of jail, always getting worse. Far down the street I saw my father going into the building. I slowed down. I was wondering what to tell the old man. We lived upstairs over the big room where my old man puts out his foreign language paper. There's my father, my mother, and me. And Tampa, when he's not in jail. My father's an honest guy. Dumb, Tampa says, but he's not dumb. Honesty gets in his way. It'll do that in the newspaper business, even a little paper like ours. It knocks your advertising, and it cuts down the news you print. My old man always calls the stuff he's not sure of. And when you do that, when you throw away everything that isn't strictly true, you'd be surprised how little news is left. I looked at our swayed-back truck standing there, loaded down with papers. It didn't make me feel any better. I went in to see the old man. He was hunched over his desk, writing. Over his shoulder, I saw he was lining up the story of Dave Macker's execution. He had a whole sheet full of Dave's early capers, and was leading up to the one day they grabbed Dave for the killing of Winky Scanlon. Dave Macker and Winky Scanlon, and Tampa, and Whitey, and probably the other tramp who was in the car when he held up the liquor store. They had always traveled together, and Scanlon had finally got his, underneath the pines in the little state park just outside the city limits. Or maybe they just dumped him there. The old man was having trouble with his story. He had headed it in English. Scanlon killer executed. I knew that was slowing him down, for no matter how far he went down the page, he must have been remembering that he had seen Tampa that morning, the morning after Scanlon was killed. Being with Tampa in the room, I'd seen the pine needles right away when he dumped them out of his shoes. When Ma saw them littering up the floor, to her it was just more housework. The old man, it was different. I think the old man caught on. Now he looked up and shook his head. I have to change it, he said. What's the difference, Pop? Dave Macker's killed other guys. It may not be quite accurate, my father said. I'm not at all sure Macker committed the crime for which he is sentenced to die. I didn't argue with him. For my money, any rap that would eliminate Macker was good for the health of the world. I guess the old man knew that too, but he wanted it straight in his paper. Tampa's back, I told him. He looked glad before he thought, and then he thought and looked grave. Oh, he said. When was he released? 2 days ago. They couldn't produce any witnesses. They gave up and let him go. Where is he? Around. He's with a couple of friends. They're doing some business right now. I told him that. It was all I could say. Could I tell him his eldest son had shot 2 people just now? Killed one, maybe both? I couldn't. My father's getting old. He couldn't stand the shock. I went upstairs to the kitchen. Ma was out shopping somewhere. I ate some cake and drank some milk, then went down the hall to my room. The door was closed. I opened it. Tampa was sitting on the edge of the bed, smoking and cleaning his gun. He jumped and snarled when I opened the door. When he saw it was me, he settled back and went on cleaning the gun. He looked like a phony actor, sitting there on the cheap iron bed, carefully cleaning that gun. Only I knew he wasn't a phony. He was as real as mad dogs come. When you come in, I asked him. Just now. I came in the back. Wanted to brush up before I saw the old man. Looking at the gun, I said, some brushing up. He's writing a story, I added, for tomorrow's paper, Dave Macker's execution. Tampa's eyes flickered. They burned him tonight, he said. Late, I said. It should have been years ago. He laughed. Always, I'll remember that he laughed. A guy was dying for Tampa's crime, and Tampa could laugh like that. It ain't what you do, said Tampa. It's what you get away with. I felt sick, and I turned to get out of the room. I'd forgotten what I came in for. Stick around, said Tampa. I stopped. You did when Tampa talked, even if you were his brother. The boy, said Tampa, shoving a little square of oily rag from the back to the front of the gun. I've gone on over to Crestview. There's a little bank over there. It closes at 3 o'clock. You and I leave here at 2:30. We're meeting the boys in front of the bank. They'll be drawing some money out. Not me, I said quickly. You, Tampa said. Or would you rather I told the old man about that caper this morning? It would kill him, I said, and I wasn't joking. It would be hard for the old man to believe that I'd run into Tampa and those guys on Oliver Street, that I'd said I'd be glad to drive the car if they were going to buy a bottle. What silly notion had been in my head? To save my murdering brother from a drunken driving charge? It would kill him, I said again. Tampa said, There's your answer. All over the house I could hear the quiet. Often there's the rumbling noise of the presses running downstairs, or Ma is in the kitchen rattling dishes and pans. Not now. All the house, all the world, it seemed to me, was holding its breath, waiting for me to decide to kill my brother. It was patient. The silence held while I thought of calling the cops, thought of 1,000 things, and got rid of all those ideas. None of them would work except the cops, and that wouldn't help my old man. I decided then, and once I knew, the normal sounds came in. I heard the board creak far down the hall. I knew that board. It creaked whenever I came in late. I'd hit it every time. It meant someone had come up the stairs, or someone was going down. Going to the door, I cracked it, looked at the empty hall. Nothing, or if there had been, it wasn't there anymore. 2:30, I said to Tampa. Yeah. Meet you here. He nodded, and I went out then. Went down to get the car keys. I needed the car to shop around. I was going to buy a gun. The car was gone, so was my father. Ma was still out somewhere. I opened the drawer in my father's desk and looked at the office gun. I hated to take it, knowing it was listed with the cops. They'd get me for killing Tampa if they made just a routine check. I hated to do it, sure, but I didn't have all day. And I might have trouble buying a gun with that wooden look on my face. The car he had grabbed was a Honey. We took the old road out of town, with Tampa doing the driving. We didn't talk very much. Tampa, I guess, had a hangover. I was too busy thinking. When we topped the hill, I could see the park on the other side of the valley. The pines looked swell, dark blue against the skyline. The road wound down between the cliffs, dropping down to the level plateau. I said, Tampa. Yeah? Isn't that where Scanlon was killed? In that state park up ahead? So they say. I'm asking you, Tampa. His head came around for an instant. Then we were heading into a curve, and he had to look at the road. Okay, he said. You asked me, so I'll tell you. He was a sorehead, and that's where he got it, all right? But they're going to execute Macker. So what? He was there. You can't stay lucky forever. It had to be now. The curves were behind us, and the car was picking up speed. There wouldn't be another sharp curve until we came to the park, I said. No, Tampa, you can't stay lucky forever. I had the gun out, had it up. My head hit the windshield when he slammed on the brakes. I felt my wrist go numb, and I knew I'd dropped the gun. He swung the blackjack again, and it came down hard on my leg. Get out, my brother said. Get out, you sneaking tramp. The edge of the road was soft and unsteady. It shifted under my feet. I stood there, waiting for it, seeing his cruel and sneering mouth. My ugly, no-good brother. The man I had failed to kill. I don't know why I don't plug you, he said. I'll be back, though, to make you sorry you ever tried that trick. Right now, I haven't got time. Here, he tossed the gun, and it fell in the sand at my feet. Learn how to use that thing before you begin to wave it. The sneer was dull in his face after he slammed the door. I didn't stoop to pick up the gun. I watched him drive away. It was a fine big car he had stolen. Its tires made a whining, humming noise as he lined it out down the road. It went out of sight around the curve, making terrific speed. It made a fine big crash. I didn't know what he had hit, but then I saw the smoke. Grabbing the gun, I came up running, and limping from the lump on my leg where the blackjack had gotten its work. The bend in the road was far away, further than I thought. I made it finally. I needn't have hurried. Our swayback truck was still blocking the road. There were papers scattered all over, and most of the bundles were burning. I couldn't see Tampa's car at all. Near the front of the truck, where he had hit, the flames were 30 feet high. It's one thing to think of killing your brother, another to know he is dead. I stood there watching the flames, and in back of me, the pine trees were making little rustling sounds. I had wished for it, wanted it, but it wasn't making me glad. I guess I heard the car start. I don't remember now. It was another car, far up the road. It rocketed out from under the trees and streaked out of sight up the hill. For a little while I thought about that, without coming up with an answer. Then, hearing another car coming, I stumbled off the road, cut back into the trees. I didn't want to see anyone. I wanted to get back to town. It was almost dark when I made it. Along our street the kids were playing their games, running and screaming, as I used to do. Tampa, too, I guess. The old man was there in the office. He whirled around when I came in. He looked even older somehow. Boy, he said, I was worried. Thank God you got home safe. Safe? I repeated after him. My feet hurt. The soles were burning like fire. Like fire. My head hurt, too, from wondering what to say. What's the news? I said. Our truck, the old man said. Somebody stole it today, and 2 men tried to rob the Crestview Bank. I saw them get stopped on the sidewalk. Did they? I kept my eyes away from his. Let them drift over the familiar objects in the room. The words on the sheet of paper leaped right up at me. It was a story the old man had been working on when I'd come in early that day. Scanlon killer executed. That heading, I said. I'd leave it the way it is. My father said, Would you, son? I looked at him, eyes wide, when I caught that tone in his voice, remembering the afternoon. I'd wanted that car, and the car had been gone long before I left with Tampa. Going to my father, I put my hand on his shoulder. I hadn't ever done that before, but neither of us noticed. Yeah, I told him. I'd leave it. I guess that's the best we can do. His head was pure silver beneath the bright white light. I took my hand off his shoulder, brushed the pine needles out of his hair. The Burglar Story by W.S. Gilbert. When I became 18 years of age, my father, a distinguished begging letter impostor, said to me, Reginald, I think it is time that you began to think about choosing a profession. These were ominous words. Since I left Eton nearly a year before, I had spent my time very pleasantly and very idly, and I was sorry to see my long holiday drawing to a close. My father had hoped to have me to Cambridge. Cambridge was a tradition in our family, but business had been very depressed of late, and a sentence of 6 months' hard labor had considerably straitened my poor father's resources. It was necessary, highly necessary, that I should choose a calling. With a sigh of resignation, I admitted as much. If you like, said my father, I will take you in hand and teach you my profession, and in a few years perhaps I may take you into partnership. But to be candid with you, I doubt whether it is a satisfactory calling for an athletic young fellow like you. I don't seem to care about it particularly, said I. I'm glad to hear it, said my father. It's a poor calling for a young man of spirit. Besides, you have to grow gray in the service before people will listen to you. It's all very well as a refuge in old age, but a young fellow is likely to make but a poor hand at it. Now, I should like to consult your own taste on so important a matter as the choice of a profession. What do you say, the army? No, I didn't care for the army. Forgery? The bar? Cornish wrecking? Father, said I should like to be a forger, but I write such an infernal hand. A regular Eton hand, said he. Not plastic enough for forgery, but you could have a writing master. It's as much as I can do to forge my own name. I don't believe I should ever be able to forge anybody else's. Anybody else's? You should say not anybody else's. It's a dreadful barbarian. Eton English. No, said I should never make a fortune at it. As to wrecking, why, you know how seasick I am. You might get over that. Besides, you would deal with wrecks ashore, not wrecks at sea. Most of it done in small boats, I'm told. A deal of small boat work. No, I won't be a wrecker. I think I should like to be a burglar. Yes, said my father, considering the subject. Yes, it's a fine, manly profession. But it's dangerous. It's highly dangerous. Just dangerous enough to be exciting, no more. Well, said my father, if you have distinct taste for burglary, I'll see what can be done. My dear father was always a prompt with pen and ink. That evening he wrote to his old friend Ferdinand Stoneleigh, a burglar of the very highest professional standing, and in a week I was duly and formally articled to him, with a view to ultimate partnership. I had to work hard under Mr. Stoneleigh. Burglary is a jealous mistress, said he. She will tolerate no rivals. She exacts the undivided devotion of her worshippers. And so I found it. Every morning at 10 o'clock I had to present myself at Stoneleigh's chambers in New Square, Lincoln's Inn, and until 12 I assisted his clerk with his correspondence. At 12 I had to go out prospecting with Stoneleigh, and from 2 to 4 I had to devote to finding out all particulars necessary to a scientific burglar in any given house. At first I did this merely for practice, and with no view to an actual attempt. He would tell me off to a house of which he knew all particulars, and order me to ascertain all about the house and its inmates, their coming and going, the number of their servants, whether any of them were men, and if so, whether they slept in the basement or not, and other details necessary to be known before burglary could be safely attempted. Then he would compare my information with his own facts, and compliment or blame me as I might deserve. He was a strict master, but always kind, just, and courteous, as became a highly polished gentleman of the old school. He was one of the last men who habitually wore Hessians. After a year's probation, I accompanied him on several expeditions, and had the happiness to believe that I was of some little use to him. I shot him eventually in the stomach, mistaking him for the master of a house into which we were breaking. I had mislaid my dark lantern, and he died on the grand piano. His dying wish was that his compliments might be conveyed to me. I now set up on my own account and engaged his poor old clerk, who nearly broke his heart at his late master's funeral. Stoneleigh left no family. His money, about £12,000, invested for the most part in American railways, he left to the Society for providing more bishops, and his ledgers, day books, memoranda, and papers generally he bequeathed to me. As the chambers required furnishing, I lost no time in commencing my professional duties. I looked through his books for a suitable house to begin upon, and found the following attractive entry. Thurlow Square number 102. House, medium. Occupant, John Davis, bachelor. Occupation, designer of dados. Age, 86. Physical peculiarities, very feeble, eccentric. Drinks, evangelical, snores. Servants, 2 housemaids, 1 cook. Sex, all female. Particulars of servants: pretty housemaid called Rachel, open to attentions, goes out for beer at 9 p.m., snores. Ugly housemaid called Bella, open to attention, snores. Elderly cook, open to attention, snores. Fastenings: Chubb's lock on street door, chain and bolts, bars to all basement windows. Practicable approach from third room, ground floor, which is shuttered and barred, but bar has no catch and can be raised with table knife. Valuable contents of house: presentation plate from grateful athletes, gold repeater, Mulready envelope, 2 diamond rings, complete edition of Badshaw from 1834 to present time, 588 volumes bound in limp calf. General: Mr. Davis sleeps 2nd floor front, servants on 3rd floor. Davis goes to bed at 10. No one in basement, swarms with beetles, otherwise excellent house for purpose. This seemed to be a capital house to try single-handed. At 12 o'clock that very night, I pocketed 2 crowbars, a bunch of skeleton keys, a center bit, a dark lantern, a box of silent matches, some putty, a life preserver, and a knife, and I set off at once for Thurlow Square. I remember that it snowed heavily. There was at least a foot of snow on the ground, and there was more to come. Poor Stoneley's particulars were exact in every detail. I got into the 3rd room on the ground floor without any difficulty, and made my way into the dining room. There was a presentation plate, sure enough, about 800 ounces. As I reckon, I collected this and tied it up so that I could carry it without attracting attention. Just as I had finished, I heard a slight cough behind me. I turned and saw a dear old silver-haired gentleman in a dressing gown standing in the doorway. The venerable gentleman covered me with a revolver. My first impulse was to rush at him and brain him with my life preserver. "Don't move," said he, "or you're a dead man." A rather silly remark occurred to me, to the effect that if I did move, it would rather prove that I was a live man, but I dismissed it at once as unsuited due to the nature of the interview. "You're a burglar?" said he. "I have that honor," said I, making for my pistol pocket. "Don't move," said he. "I have often wished to have the pleasure of encountering a burglar, in order to be able to test a favorite theory of mine as to how persons of that class should be dealt with. But you mustn't move." I replied that I should be happy to assist him, if I could do so consistently with a due regard to my own safety. "Promise me," said I, "that you will allow me to leave the house unmolested when your experiment is at an end. If you obey me promptly, you shall be at perfect liberty to leave the house. You will neither give me into custody, nor take any steps to pursue me?" "On my honor as a designer of dados," said he. "Good," said I. "Go on." "Stand up," said he, "and stretch out your arms at right angles to your body." "Suppose I don't," said I. "I send a bullet through your left ear," said he. "But permit me to observe," said I. Bang! A ball cut off the lobe of my left ear. The ear smarted, and I should have liked to attend to it, but under the circumstances I thought it better to comply with the whimsical old gentleman's wishes. "Very good," said he. "Now do as I tell you promptly, and without a moment's hesitation, or I'll cut off the lobe of your right ear. Throw me that life preserver." "But, would you?" said he, cocking the revolver. The click decided me. Besides, the old gentleman's eccentricity amused me, and I was curious to see how far it would carry him, so I tossed my life preserver to him. He caught it neatly. "Now, take off your coat and throw it to me." I took off my coat and threw it diagonally across the room. "Now the waistcoat." I threw the waistcoat to him. "Boots," said he. They are shoes, said I, in some trepidation lest he should take offense when no offense was really intended. Shoes, then, said he. I threw my shoes to him. Trousers, said he. Come, come, I say, exclaimed I. Bang! The lobe of the other ear came off. With all his eccentricity, the old gentleman was a man of his word. He had the trousers and with them my revolver, which happened to be in the right-hand pocket. Now, the rest of your drapery. I threw him the rest of my drapery. He tied up my clothes in the tablecloth, and telling me that he wouldn't detain me any longer, made for the door with a bundle under his arm. Stop, said I. What is to become of me? Really? I hardly know, said he. You promised me my liberty, said I. Certainly, said he. Don't let me trespass any further on your time. You will find the street door open, or, if from force of habit you prefer the window, you will have no difficulty in clearing the area railings. But I can't go like this. Won't you give me something to put on? No, said he, nothing at all. Good night. The quaint old man left the room with my bundle. I went after him, but I found that he had locked an inner door that led upstairs. The position was really a difficult one to deal with. I couldn't possibly go into the street as I was, and if I remained I should certainly be given into custody in the morning. For some time I looked in vain for something to cover myself with. The hats and greatcoats were no doubt in the inner hall. At all events, they were not accessible under the circumstances. There was a carpet on the floor, but it was fitted to the recesses of the room, and moreover a heavy sideboard stood upon it. However, there were 12 chairs in the room, and it was with no little pleasure I found on the back of each an antimacassar. 12 of them would go a long way towards covering me, and that was something. I did my best with them, but on reflection I came to the conclusion that they would not help me very much. They certainly covered me, but a gentleman walking through South Kensington at 3 a.m., dressed in nothing whatever but coverings, with the snow 2 feet deep on the ground, would be sure to attract attention. I might pretend that I was doing it for a wager, but who would believe me? I grew very cold. I looked out of the window and presently saw the bull's-eye of a policeman who was wearily plodding through the snow. I felt that my only course was to surrender to him. Policeman, said I from the window, one word. Anything wrong, sir? Said he. I've been committing a burglary in this house, and shall feel deeply obliged to you if you will kindly take me into custody. Nonsense, sir, said he. You'd better go to bed. There's nothing I should like better, but I live in Lincoln's Inn, and I have nothing on by furniture coverings. I'm almost frozen. Pray take me. The street door's open, said he. Yes, said I. Come in and take me if you will. He came in. I explained the circumstances to him, and with great difficulty I convinced him that I was in earnest. The good fellow put his own greatcoat over me and lent me his own handcuffs. In 10 minutes I was throwing myself in Walton Street police station. In 10 days I was convicted at the Old Bailey. 10 years I returned from penal servitude. I found that poor Mr. Davis had gone to his long home in Brompton Cemetery. For many years I never passed his house without a shudder at the terrible hours I spent in it as his guest. I've often tried to forget the incident. I have been relating him for a long time. I tried in vain. Perseverance, however, met with its reward. I continued to try. Gradually, one detail after another slipped from memory, and one lovely evening, last May, I found to my intense delight that I had absolutely forgotten all about it.